we are going to call this special board meeting study session to order, and it's almost 8:45. And I think, I don't know, do we do a roll call? I mean, we're all here except for Mr. Kim, who should be joining us very soon. I think we're all good. Yes, I know. So in front of you, you have our agenda for the day. We are planning to adjourn to closed session at the conclusion of this meeting or 11:30, whichever is sooner. So should we wrap things up 10:30, that's when we would adjourn. So even though it says on here 11:30, we're not sure how long our meeting is going to go, and we are going to go to closed session right away. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, then we have, well, do we need to do a roll call? Or no? Is there any public comment? All right.
One behind you.
Oh, we do have, I'm sorry.
Someone just straggled in.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Come to the front.
Okay, I was like, wait,
Yeah,
I don't need a
Put the
podium.
podium, do you need the podium?
Oh, I could just be right here.
Okay,
it's fine.
thank you.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't,
no, you're
I
fine.
thought you were part of our presentation this morning.
I think you can handle this without.
Oh, did we adopt the agenda?
Jim?
We didn't adopt.
Jim?
Oh, do you want
I
to do
didn't
that?
vote. No, just wait.
Oh, it doesn't say it. Yeah. Okay, before we go to public comment, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay. Agenda adopted and public comment. Welcome.
Good morning, President and board members, trustees. My name is Matt Huerta, and I am a parent at Los Padres of 3 and former school site council member as well. I don't want to interrupt all your amazing work you have going on today. It's very important that you guys continue to set the whole district on the right path here. But I'm coming to you with a concern, and I wanted to make sure you were aware of it. Myself and many other parents have been working with the city to really ask them to reconsider and actually terminate their contract with the live PD show. I don't know if you've seen this show. I've only seen it a couple times. I kind of knew it was a bad idea from the get-go. The quick backstory is that the city considered this partnership with the show about a year ago, in August last year. And they had no public hearings. They did not notify anybody about it. I happened to just be at a council meeting on other business and heard about it. And I and many others were very disappointed, but the chief and the city council and others had already moved forward with their contract. And so we made a little bit of ruckus and said, hey, this is not a good idea, but whatever. And so they went forward. It's been a year, and there is really, really troubling information coming out of that show. We don't need help in telling people our dirty laundry. We need help in telling the amazing things that our students, teachers, parents, leadership are doing. And this is an international platform. There's Twitter comments coming from Panama saying, hey, I just met somebody and I'm in Panama, and they said, the first thing they said to me, oh, you're from Salinas, that cop show. And then there's these other terrible comments as well about feeding into this whole cloud that the Trump administration is feeding about all the danger coming across from people that look a certain way and talk a certain way from the border. And when you look at the show, the majority of people that are being pulled over are Latino. And so there's comments, it's very interesting. Say, oh, have you guys seen this show? Everybody that's turned over, that's being busted are Latinos. And then other people are saying, oh, California, not just Salinas, but California is an S-hole. Not in those words. You know how people are on social media, right? So just use your imagination. But my point is that We are working diligently to try to secure support on there. It's interesting, there actually is already 3 folks on the city council that have pretty much said, hey, you know what, this has got to go. We're really 1 vote away. And so we're asking for other leaders in the community to step forward. You might see a sign-on letter at some point soon. I think we're close to working with the mayor. He's having second thoughts about the show. But, you know, it's very difficult to go against police officers and the chief and others who think that it's a good idea still. They think there's some merits to the show. They think that some of the drop in homicide rate and other violent crime is due in part because of it. There's no data to support that, but people will have their opinions, that's fine. And so that's kind of where we're at. And we recently received the endorsement from the Democratic Central Committee. Folks that are associated with that moved forward and said, you know what, as Democrats in our region, we feel strongly that this show does not represent the interests of our community. And as a really, and then also the Salinas Unified High School District also took a position on that. And so it may come before you. We might ask that if there's any interest here for that to come forward to make a statement. I think that these things do require some leadership and to say who are we, what are we for? And not so much what we're against, but what are we for? We're for positive community policing and partnerships in our community. And this show does not support that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the community that would like to speak? All right. Thank you, Mr. Huerta.
Thank you. Take care.
At this point, then, we're going to move on to our study session. As you all well know, we had a special education report done, and so today we're going to see the results of that report. I think in total. Okay, thank you.
Katie will be leading the charge.
I'm going to take one and pass it on.
Good morning. So good morning, I'm Katie Ballesteri. I am the Director for Special Education. I am here to share a couple different documents as well as some information that we have here in the presentation. In your packet, you will see all of the recommendations from this special education study. Thank you for not having my backside today. All of the recommendations in the study, as well as in sort of a 3-year timeline, as well as one that is just this year, to look at how we are prioritizing those recommendations. So, just kidding.
Did you turn it on?
No, there we go.
It would help. Oh, mine isn't plugged in.
Okay, Katie, just a second. At this point, because this is a study session and it's a little more casual, if anyone has a question at the board, we can stop and ask questions and interact as the meeting is progressing. We don't have to wait till a formal time. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take your less formal note and take a seat if that's okay.
Yeah, just relax. Please, Katie.
Everyone except for me, okay.
Yeah, no, Katie, we want you front and center. Good morning, Mr. Kim.
So I believe this infographic, if that's the right term for it, should be familiar to us. This is the framework under which we are, all of our businesses running in our district. And something important that I just want to bring to front and center is that there is not a chunk of this pie that says special education, because special education happens throughout each and every tier of this of our district. It's not a just part of principals or just a part of what happens for our students. So it is running throughout the entire cake. So in this study, I think you all received a copy of it. There are multiple areas, I believe 11 areas, where there were recommendations and that were looked at. Here they are. This is my 21st year in the Salinas City School District, and this study really kind of helped me to frame. It wasn't a lot of new information or thoughts, but it really helped me to frame the way I'm thinking about our special education department. And so hopefully you'll kind of feel the same way once we go through our timeline. So the first area was that general education to special education pathway, really looking at our SST process and how our students are receiving interventions in the general education classrooms before getting to the special education department. And so we are, as an ed services team, working to define and clarify what used to be known as the SST process, which now we're looking at as the multi-tiered systems of support, to really look at interventions for our students and how we're monitoring student progress so that hopefully they don't need special education. That's the goal. And so we are continuing to work on that process, and it will be rolled out district-wide this year.
So, just to clarify, SST, as I remember it, was never a function of special education. It was a function of general education, and specialists from special education were invited to be a part of that so they could give input. But somehow, and it was when I was teaching even, it flipped, and all of a sudden everybody just assumed that because you were going to SST, that meant you were going to put a child on the track for special education. And I,
And that's something kind of that happened kind of statewide, because in other districts I was at, that was kind of, don't put them on SST because that's a track for an IEP.
yeah,
And
so
it
you,
is
it was,
not.
and
Yes.
yeah, like you were, that was like your
Yes.
last resort. You
Yes.
were putting a child before SST. So under this new process, is that going to be emphasized that this is not
It's going
a
to be
part of
very
special
clear
education?
as to what kind of tiers are being done in the classroom, starting with our universal screener. And we'll have graphics that represent when a child is in what tier depending upon what the data is showing us. So it's going to be very clear. It should not be a pathway. It should be a pathway for interventions. That if our interventions in general education are not happening, that is, after many, many tries and after a whole year of support with very documented strategies in terms of what we've tried, then we have that conversation, but not until we've exhausted everything we can possibly do in gen ed.
So
Also, can I just say that Mr. Galimba is just, he's learning the acronyms, so can you tell us what SST is and MTSS is?
Okay.
So when it comes to acronyms, it would be really helpful for, I know we have educators in the room that are on the board, but there are others.
But sometimes
who-
we struggle with it.
So SST is Student Study Team.
Some people call it a student success team. And we're really in a time where we're looking at the whole child and transitioning to what is being called the multi-tiered systems of support. So it takes not just the academic portion of a student's learning, but also their health, their well-being, their mental health. And so we're looking at the multi-tiered systems of support. How do we support every student and get them what they need in order to be successful? So that's what the the MTSS process that is in development is looking at those interventions or just the basic beginning instruction and mental health opportunities we have for our students, and then building on those depending on what a student needs.
So my question then would be, under the MTSS process, would a teacher who is, say, like really new to the profession and who had a sense of all the interventions but struggled with really what would be effective, would that be an appropriate place for that teacher then to say, I'm going to take this student to MTSS through the MTSS process so I have a clear idea of what I should do? Or is this really still the last, like I've tried every single thing and now I'm at the point where
So-
I think I'm gonna need special education.
I will give you the kind of the bigger picture. So it starts with that universal screening that we'll look at. So students take the universal screening at the beginning of the year. You look at the whole class, each teacher, and it'll be a collaboration of at the grade level. They look at the data and say, okay, we have so many kids that are not performing at grade level. Here are the strategies we're going to try class-wide. So, and they try those strategies for 6 to 8 weeks when the universal screener is taken again for those kids that are struggling or below grade level. And if those strategies work at the class level, then the teacher continues at them, but then you analyze at that 8th week, okay, so who are my students that are really struggling regardless of the strategies that we put into place? And that's what then triggers the SST tier 2 layers of support, and you try different strategies depending upon the areas of weakness. So it does very much start with the universal screener, but identifying strategies for the whole class before you start identifying students that might need it. And that's we're putting the process in place. How are we going to track that data for those 6 to 8 weeks for tier 1? And how do we transition that data to tier 2, where are the students that even though we're trying all of these strategies, it's still not working. So we need to try something different and more individualized for the student. And we'll roll all of that out with forms and graphics and flowcharts and all of that.
Are we going to allow our teachers time to PLC this,
Yes.
Just that, not like a bunch of other stuff that's checking off boxes, but actually to focus on strengthening these strategies and looking at where they might have fell behind with some, and then working on success for those children
Yes.
or that child. Because it might be
Yes.
having them go in with a different teacher.
Right.
It might just be that.
Right.
So-
Yeah, so we're
gonna
building
hear
that time, yes.
We're gonna hear that feedback from the
Yes,
teachers.
we're gonna build in that time because it does take the collaboration at the grade level in order to really analyze the data, to put those strategies in place and document what's been tried and what's not working. Because we don't want to keep doing what's not working, what else can we try? So yes, it's gonna be a team process at the grade level.
So the MTSS process is going to still, like SST, be the place where once you've gone through all those tiers of support and you've reached a point where the classroom is just not effective for a particular child, that would be when you would go to the MTSS team meeting? Or I'm still
So
trying to think
the
of
charm-
when you get to that
Right, so
point.
the charm, I'm gonna use the word charm. To me, the charm of the MTSS process is that it's not relying on each individual teacher to decide when it's time to move ahead. It's actually using that universal screener data to say, okay, these are the students that although we've provided all of these interventions are not, they're not
Being successful.
experiencing success. And so the process is that now these students are in the process.
Okay, so it takes that subjective kind of feeling out of the
Right.
equation.
That's why we need that universal screener.
So will you be waiting, again, in my day, you wouldn't take a first grader to SST unless it was really a blatant problem. It usually was around end of second and third grade that you started taking kids to SST because you wanted to give them a chance to mature, to, grow in their learning, just natural learning. And so under this new process, you might be taking a first grader to MTSS?
You have kindergartners, first graders, all the way through sixth graders. Because it's not a pathway. I think it's changing a frame of reference. It's not a pathway to special education. It is how do we get kids what they need when they need it. If we wait until they're in second grade and then figure out that they need,
They might already be 2 grades behind.
it's kind of too late.
I think I say this all the time, I'm gonna say it again. My gut just tells me, if you're looking at a 5-year-old child and you're telling them you need intervention, I am afraid of that. I'm afraid for the child, I'm afraid for the family, I'm afraid for what that's gonna do. I don't know, I'm just gonna say it, I'm gonna put it out there. I think kids need time to mature.
And I think that's the beauty of going from SST to MTSS, because MTSS not only covers the academics, there's also the physical, mental health, there's also the social emotional learning. So we're going to be doing the universal assessment for SEL, or social emotional learning, to see, so it's going to be a trifecta of data, it's not just going to be relying on academics.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I'm going to tell you guys, I sat down with some kindergarten teachers and I looked at some of those tests that they're giving. And I think most kindergartners would fail because it relied on being able to know in front of a screen when to push a button. You couldn't answer this without pushing this. If you had to hear the story, you had to, I mean, these poor kids, and then they had like 35 questions. So, and they're and this was the first week of, the first few weeks of school. And I'm thinking, these are 5-year-olds. I don't care if they've had preschool. I don't care how smart they are, what families they come from. When you put them in front of that screen and now we're, it just worries me. I would love to see what the universal screener is going to look at in kindergarten, because unless it's going to focus on just letter sounds, and I don't think a kindergartner should have to be able to comprehend already the first month of school, to be able to hear a story and then answer a series of questions about the story. They don't even know what that's about, most of them, in front of a computer screen. Now, if you're talking about, the letter, do you know the sound, which is the sound, and you can press, that's something different. But I worry about, I don't know, and this is my own personal opinion, I just worry about what we're doing to our little ones. And while I'm on the bandwagon, I think it leads to behavior problems, because if you're in kindergarten and you already feel like you're a failure, why even try? Kindergartners are savvy, they know. I would rather have everyone laugh at me or look at me, I'd rather entertain everybody than be targeted as someone, oh, he doesn't know how to read. And those kindergartners are savvy, they know exactly who knows their letter sounds and who doesn't, they're very smart about that. That just scares me. And then, we're starting in kindergarten, you guys, 5-year-olds.
I think we should focus on the report.
Well, yeah.
Put us back to our line
Well,
here,
but I
so-
feel like, you're making some decisions based on what you're going to do, and if someone doesn't say what they feel at this level, then, we're gonna just do the same old,
And remember, I told you, I promised you, we're looking at the whole assessment matrix in
Yeah.
itself. It's something that we're tackling this year. And, that's something that we can address, but yeah, I understand where you're coming from. So we'll take a look at it. I promise, I told you, I promise
Okay.
we'd take a look at it. So.
Okay. I hope so, because
Yes.
I think it's all intertwined, you guys, I really do.
And so this one pager that you got in your packet is just all of the different areas that fell under number 1 for MTSS, and all of them will be addressed as we roll out the new process. So I just wanted you guys to have it's directly from the report, there's nothing new. There is a couple of items from other parts in the report that also related to MTSS. So all of this will be covered when we roll it out.
I have a
So,
question.
yes.
Because I'm looking at this and we're gonna, it's gonna be implemented district-wide, and you say that there's gonna be PLC on it. And one level of PLC is at the local site, right, with the grade level, like say 3rd grade, and they all meet. So now, when we start doing this, are you gonna have all the 3rd grade teachers in the district sit and meet?
It's by school site, so they will meet with
So
their.
we're really not gonna implement the same kind of thing everywhere, because we're not gonna have all of our 1st grade teachers and our 2nd grade teachers and our 3rd grade teachers talking about the same thing.
Well, each school site is very different, so we're going to be training all of the administrators and all of the teachers on assignment and TOSAs that actually are
So
part
I
of the
know that all
SST
the school
process.
sites are different, I just know that I've worked in a school site where it really adds value when you bring all the teachers of a grade level together to collaborate. It doesn't matter whether the sites are different, it really adds more value and it strengthens the teaching when you can do that. So I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Okay, we can look at that.
Go ahead, I'll just keep it, it's okay. I had a thought, but I'm gonna keep it for the moment. So when you look at the large document, you can see how we have year 1, year 2, year 3, and then this last column that says to consider. So these are the items that in our timeline are in year 1. So I just wanted to point out that under identification rate, there are some items that will not happen until year 2, just in terms of really trying to focus on what we kind of don't want to put the cart before the horse types of situations. So our identification rate, we do receive our reports annually that talk about our identification rate, like what disabilities do we are we over-identifying or identifying more than the statewide average or the county-wide average. And so using that data to really think about what changes or what assessment techniques or what we have in place in our district in order to be able to better serve students. We need to know what is it that they need in order to serve them. So this will all be taken to our leadership team, the one that will be developed, because it can't just be us sitting in the district office deciding that we're over-identifying or looking at the data with one lens. Having our staff who are actually in the trenches providing the support to the students will be really important when we look at our assessment tools and how we are actually identifying our students. And then you can see with our service options and our least restrictive environment area, we actually have some items that we've started. I was lucky enough to come into this process with, I was part of the interviews that created this report, and then I was offered this position sort of as they were finishing up collecting the data. So we were able to take care of some of these items and get them started. So for example, Lori Sanders ordered an Orton Gillingham based. Orton Gillingham is the research that the new Sunday reading program is based on. It is developed for students who have dyslexia and dyslexic-like reading disabilities. And so that program was already purchased when I walked through the door. Our RSP teachers have been trained for 2 days with the trainer from the company, and then at our first grade level release meeting, we were able to sit down and actually look at the students who they've assessed for the program and that they're actually working with the program. So part of our grade level release time with all of the RSP teachers is spent really looking at the data of what this program is providing for the students. And that kind of goes along with building accountability systems for implementation of adopted curriculum. I'm actually leaving here today when we are done with our meeting to go meet with my 3rd through 6th grade special day class teachers, and we're looking at our math curriculum, what we're using in our special day classes for math. So through that grade level release time, we're able to really keep each other accountable for what we're doing in our classrooms. And then the other item that we've already started is increasing students' access in general education settings without over-dependence of one-to-one aids. We have borrowed and then reworked what's called a SCIA process. That is a special circumstance intervention. Oh, I always forget this darn A. It's basically a process by which you look at a student, collect their data, and decide what intervention needs to take place in order for their behavior to be functional in the classroom. It could end up with a one-to-one. It could not. It could be other interventions being put into place. So those are the items that we have already begun. The rest of this continuum of service options are items that we will continue to work on. And you can see sort of in the notes who on the yellow, on the page with the yellow, the shorter page that's just this year, you can see who will be providing or starting that process, and then some notes about how that process will start.
And the color coding is, the yellow is the ones that are top priority that we're really working to make sure that we accomplish it. And then anything in green is stuff, items that have already been completed as we go through this.
Can you tell me the name of that reading program again that you guys purchased?
Sonday, S-O-N-D-A-Y. It's kind of like Sunday, but with an O.
Oh, yeah.
And all of our RSP teachers are using those,
Yes.
as well as some special day classes?
There are a couple special day classes who are using it, and now they're all begging for it.
Oh.
And it's been great. The preliminary results of it is, not from our district, but from other districts, has been astounding. It's really, really good.
I purchased it when I was at Loma Vista for my RSP teacher because I knew we needed something.
And you
and
went to
her-
the training too, didn't you?
And her results, for the group of kids, it's not for every student,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's a matter of having the correct menu of options for our students, because some students need that phonics and phonemic awareness instruction. Other students are gonna be whole word learners, but we need to have the options for them. So it's a really good place to start. And then this would be item 4, organizational structure. Walking through the door, in my brain, this is kind of where I was starting. I think there's an item here that says, this year's goal. Yes, the big one, this year's goal. Build a solid team of special educators across the district and establish confidence in the leadership. That's sort of, if I were to tell you what my goal is this year, that would be it. Because none of these other items are gonna happen if we don't start there. So this organizational structure area, that's why the whole thing is highlighted yellow. There are a lot of items here that need to take place. A lot of it is about business, human resources, and the special education department working hand in hand to make sure that the basics of staffing and funding are in line. If you don't have your staffing and your funding in line, none of the other things you do are gonna be possible.
And how is our staffing?
Almost there. It's nationwide, staffing is a struggle. And I took the opportunity at our parent leadership conference to speak with Dr. Alvarado from CSUMB, is it Alvarado? And we really talked about, especially with special education, he says most of the people walking through the door looking for a special education credential are not there because they are passionate and grew up wanting to be a special educator. They're there looking for the special education credential because they just got hired as an intern. So we're dealing with a very different set of employees and also a very different set of kind of being creative about how we're looking for staff.
Is there any attempt, to get a pulse on our teachers within our district who are already showing like an affinity for that type of student that you could entice over to special education? Or, actually going out and soliciting?
That was something that he and I spoke about, is that we really need to think of not just them, but also we have these amazing employees who are our behavior specialists.
Yeah.
They're classified employees, but they have this, and we've trained them and given them the skills to be really quality teachers in terms of behavior management. If they went to school to learn that academic piece, they would be amazing. And so he's very interested in working with us to think about how to do that.
Now, is a special ed teacher on a different pay scale than your
Same
regular
pay
teacher?
scale, different credential.
Okay, maybe we can entice teachers by
Same way as our.
promoting a stipend or.
Did you want to say?
So I wanted to mention that we have 2 pipelines going, one with Hartnell and one with CSUMB to attract classified applicants to work towards their credential. So we already have some people in the district that are participating in these 2 pipelines. And in fact, last year we were successful with one. So one of our classified members became a teacher. So we're hoping to see more results in the near future, because we know that we have about 10 maybe 12 people that are working towards that. But it's a multi-year process, because some people are straight out of high school, so they have to work towards their BA first and then the credential. Some others have a BA already, so those are the ones at CSUMB who are already working towards their credentials. So it's going to happen. It's happening, but it's a multi-year project. And in terms of a stipend, we are negotiating right now, because that is the district's desire, to establish a stipend for hard-to-fill positions. Special education would be one, and then the other one would be dual language instruction.
On that point, would our stipend be competitive with other districts?
It has to be. It has to be, otherwise we will not attract anybody if they can just go across the street and get $2,000 or $3,000 more. So yeah, so it has to be.
Do you have an amount right now?
No, we're in the process of negotiating. I'm looking at what other districts are giving, and other districts give a multi-year stipend. So they may say, we're going to give $10,000, but they give it in several years. So we can structure it that way too, or we can structure it at one time, or and so we're in the process with the teachers union to negotiate that.
Doesn't CSEA offer incentives through their union? One is my, you probably don't know the answer. Because I remember when about 3 years ago on the high school district board, we had a discussion about this, and there was funding from the state. So maybe that's something, somehow there was a grant or funding that would pay for them, and there's like a ton of classified, like the Cowboy one, you know, his daughter, I can't think of his first name right now, but it's okay, who's now a teacher, who were classified employees for like 15 or 20 years, who are now teaching in a classroom. I do like the multi-level approach, because if we say it's a $10,000 stipend and then they just come, some people will just hop to districts to get the stipend. But I would like to see if there's a way that's legal, that the stipend can be put towards their education and not their income. Like if you took the class and that it's not something that, I don't know if it's legal or not, but you could look into it. So to incentivize, because I think that we have a lot of people who would do it if it was more affordable for them.
You know, so, or a little bit of both, you know, towards your education.
That's true too. That's true.
Are we a district that qualifies for forgiving student loans if certain students come to work for us
Yes, we
in
are.
different areas? We are a district.
Yeah, we are.
I think that's
I think
an
it's more
amazing
school level than
opportunity.
it is district, if I remember correctly.
Most of our
Work and
schools,
entitlements.
Yeah,
most of our schools will
it
qualify.
depends.
But
what the teacher
aren't all
wants.
of our schools Title I except for maybe one or
Yeah,
two?
but I don't know what the legal
Actually,
pieces
all of them
are.
are now.
Yeah.
All of them
Yeah.
are. All 14 are Title I.
I know when, because I
But it's school-wide, not
participated
district-wide?
in the,
Yeah, it's
in the forgiveness
assigned
program.
to the school, but we all qualify for Title I, so yeah.
Because I,
But I just don't know if it's a Title I school, I don't know if it's a percentage.
but if we looked at, even if we assigned those people to those schools to forgive a student loan, you know, I mean, that's a huge incentive there. I mean, just knowing that we are a district that can qualify for that, I think might be another hook.
Something
Because, you know, if I'm gonna go to work for Pacific Grove, or I'm gonna go to work for a school in Salinas City, and if I go to work for a school in Salinas City, I get my student loans forgiven, I mean, that's a no-brainer, so I think that's,
We do qualify.
we
You
do.
know, one of the concerns I would have, Alejandro, is that what we mentioned here, you know, that it doesn't just, you know, we're not just discussing it and it's out in thin air, that it becomes,
Reality.
becomes practice, it
Yeah.
becomes reality, yeah. So.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm gonna tell people that.
You know what, Robert Ramirez sent me a text a while back, and he said that there's a Golden State Teacher Grant Program, which has a $20,000, it's a $20,000 incentive grant, and that it's gonna be implemented like in November or December, And the budget committee for the assembly recommended it over the governor's loan forgiveness program. And so I'd like for you to, when you talk to Alvarado, that is, I now maybe.
I had it's an A.
With CHMB, Jose Luis, if you could ask him if that's something that CHMB is going to offer, and maybe work through our human resources department to promote that, because the assembly's really excited about that.
We
And it's
told
already
again
passed.
Golden State.
It's called the Golden State Teacher Grant Program, and it's a $20K incentive grant.
I know that CSUMB had a really great grant, it was 2 or 3 years ago for psychologists, and basically anybody wanting to become a school psychologist was pretty much given almost a free ride. It was a great incentive. I know that they're working, and I don't know Alejandro, because both of us sit on their advisory committee, so usually it's about the teacher shortage. Right now they're looking at, I know they just established the bilingual program, and they've been doing special ed for a few years. I think we've been very fortunate as we build these alliances and partnerships with the universities, especially CSUMB, we have a bigger chance of attracting those candidates into our district.
I think almost half my psychologists came through the CSUMB program, at least 5 of them. That's not quite half, maybe a third, excuse my math, but, and that program really prepared them. They're amazing. Most of them are bilingual, and they were interns with us last year, and now they are full employees. That was an amazing partnership. Now we just need that in the speech department, which I believe they're starting this year.
At CHMB?
I believe they're starting a speech and language
Wow, that's
program.
huge.
Or at least they were reaching out for information about speech and language needs. So I'm hoping that means that they're on the path.
Because I know at one time, the county office had a cohort of teachers that wanted to become speech and language. I mean, you had to go through this very intensive coursework, but I want to say they offered it for free. And you had to apply to become I mean, and then you had to guarantee that you were going to go back to your district and work in the capacity of that, so. I don't
Didn't
know
you
how-
teach in that program, Alejandro?
Not in the speech and language.
But you were there when you were teaching when they were doing that.
It was through San Jose.
Yeah.
It was through San Jose State?
Yeah,
Because it was when we were on the.
yeah.
That was, yeah. I don't know why they didn't do that again.
Well, the state has many different grants, and so the universities look at these grants and apply for the ones that they feel that they can implement. And so, like I said, we have agreements with CSUMB, and we have agreements with Hartnell, depending on the level where the student is. And we have an agreement with Bramman also, but Bramman continues to be a private institute, so it's more expensive. But yeah, in terms of people wanting to get their credentials and so on, so they have opportunities. Yeah.
Would the grant opportunities at CSUMB be the same grant opportunities at San Jose State?
No.
So why wouldn't we partner with San Jose State? So we have a lot of people who commute that way.
Yeah, no.
I think if the university applies for the grants, they have.
What? I'm sorry.
I think the university has to apply for the grants. Usually, I mean, that's the way I've experienced it, is they're interested in pursuing a certain grant that's out there or the state is offering, and then they begin kind of that inquiry process.
No, I understand that, but my question to you, Alejandro, is why wouldn't we cast our net wider for more opportunities for people? You know, why, if CHMB is just focusing on this grant, a special ed grant, but San Jose State is focusing on speech, a speech therapy grant or counseling grant or something else, why wouldn't we cast our net wider?
Yeah, and that's the way it used to be before CSUMB opened up,
Yeah.
and before CSUMB started implementing programs. It was San Jose State was the main connector, but But now we see more of CSUMB because they're closer. They need our partnership when they apply for these grants. And so they contact us and they say, would you be our partner? And we look at it and say, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sounds like we have leverage.
Yeah, we do.
Well, and Katie, I agree with what you say, though, that the person needs to have that passionate connection with that type of student, because otherwise they're going to burn out and walk away.
It's a hard job,
It is a very hard job.
yeah,
Very,
and they
very
need to be
hard job.
prepared.
Yeah. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
But good conversation,
good,
you
it's
guys.
good
That's what
discussion.
this is about. Yeah.
So this is the area for our staffing and caseloads where we have already done the most, because after the consultants came to gather their data for their report, they actually came back and met with some of us to work on our staffing. So I was invited to come in May, I believe it was the end of May or early June, to work through this staffing and caseload rollout with them. And so we took all of our students, we counted them, we figured out what programs they were in, so that we didn't have extra staff that we didn't need to pay for. So our SDC, RSP, speech ratios all were shifted based on actual students in seats who need services. So that's why so much of this already says done. A couple things that were changes through this process, we added a new therapeutic support program for our kinder through third grade students. Therapeutic support is a program for students with severe behavior needs. We've had a 4th, 5th, and 6th grade program at Sherwood, and we opened a kinder through third grade program this year. We changed our way of offering speech and language services to students who are preschool age but not enrolled in preschool. So instead of having them go to their school of attendance for their speech services, we are developing speech service centers. So there's a couple different geographically located schools where we have staff to serve the students who need the speech services. And our SDC numbers stayed pretty similar. Our psychologist numbers stayed pretty similar, but those were the biggest changes.
Okay, so I'm looking at the RSP caseloads,
And
the ones that are
RSP is
not. Resource specialists, those are the kids that are in the general ed classroom.
an
are
FTE.
served Full-time.
Full-time employee. So we talk about either, sometimes you'll hear a 1.0 FTE or a 0.8 FTE. And so it's just talking about whether they're a 100% 1.0 full-time employee or an 80% full-time employee. So RSP, sorry, you mean?
Well, I was just saying, ensure that the district completes the proper RSP caseload waiver. If a teacher exceeds a caseload of 28, ensure no RSP teacher has more than 32 students on his or her case management load, and those are not done. So does that mean we do have RSP teachers with a caseload higher than 32 or higher than 28?
I just got all of my caseload. So what happens is at the beginning of September, somewhere right around the beginning of September, I sent out a caseload form for all of the staff to fill out, because not only do we need to keep count for the waivers, we also have to keep count because in the contract, for every 10 days they're over their caseload, they actually are paid a certain sum of money. So I just received most of them back. Many of them did not send them back, so I've been going through Cyrus to make sure. We have some teachers who are over 28 that will have to ask about, go through the process of getting a waiver. It starts with actually the union as well as the employee and coming up with a plan for how you're going to help, I guess, mitigate. What kinds of additional help are you going to offer to that classroom in order to serve those extra 4 students?
Okay, so then I guess the question I have would be, if you are at maximum caseload, let's say at a few different schools, knowing that during the year you're going to have students who qualify for those programs, is there is there ever the idea that you would assume that at each school site, you may get 2 more students during the school year? So let's just put 2 phantom students on a caseload so that we, as we're determining, or is that fiscally irresponsible?
I mean, I can see it both ways, because it's really hard to have an itinerant person for 2 kids go to this school, and then for 2 kids go to that school, and then for 2 kids go to this school.
Because I'm gonna tell you, I heard on very good authority that there was a parent who went through the SST process. Their student was fully assessed and qualified for RSP services, but was told that the RSP services at that school were already full, and so they would have to either transfer to another school or wait for their services.
Well, they can't wait, they have to be offered the services, and it depends on if they belong to that school site or not.
Okay.
They would have to apply for a transfer, but that sounds like a very strange.
I know, so when I heard it, I was alarmed because I thought, you can't say that to a parent.
No.
Because it's illegal.
Right, because if you qualify for services.
But we're in litigation all the time for comments and things that people say, not realizing that it's going to have a huge impact legally. So is that, I mean, I don't know where an idea like that would even come from.
I don't either, we should talk about that later.
Yeah, we should talk about it later. Yeah.
Preschool. So this doesn't mean preschool, gen ed preschool. This is talking about our special day class preschool. We have right now a co-taught preschool where the state preschool and a special education teacher are working together to have some students with IEPs in the general education state preschool program, as well as 3 special day class preschools in the district. Last year we had an additional preschool, I believe, at Natividad, and this year we do not have that, so we decreased by 1 preschool teacher. Special day or special education preschool teachers are like unicorns to find, because they not only have to have a special education credential, they also have to have those early childhood units. So creating this program is, when you find them, they're amazing, but it can be challenging. And right now we are, as the second item says, be aware of growth. So every time a student turns 3 years old, if they are receiving outside services, we have an obligation to assess them to see if they also qualify for services in our district. And so every day we have students turning 3 that we are assessing, and many of them need special education preschool services. So we have to be really thoughtful about what we're doing
Do
there.
those services, when you get those referrals, do they come from San Andreas or do they come from the county office or both?
Both, but generally San Andreas.
So can't you work with San Andreas? I mean, you must have a knowledge of child from the time they first start receiving services as infants that, hey, this child is, you know, I mean, you must, it can't be a surprise if
So about 6 months in advance, we go to what's called the IFSP meeting. We're invited, San Andreas invites us to the meeting. About 6 months. Depends on who their case carrier is, I'll be honest. I would love to tell you what that acronym stands for, and I will let you know as soon as it comes to my mind.
what is that?
The IFSP is
it's
the
families-
services for students who are 0
individual
to
family
2 years,
service?
11 months old.
Yeah, is it like individualized family service provider?
It's early childhood,
Yeah.
Close enough.
baby
Yeah.
to 3-year-old services.
I made that up, but I'm thinking
Yeah.
it makes sense.
I like it, that sounds good, Amy.
According to.
Is this recommendation though, this is year specific, right? This was just
The
for this
first
year.
one was year specific, to
Yeah.
go to four teachers in preschool. The second one is the challenge, right?
Yeah.
So, working with San Andreas, yes, but what happens is we get their paperwork and they use very different assessments than we do. So it'll say, here are the areas of concern based on our assessments,
Yeah.
and then you can't just assume that they're going to need X, Y, or Z service. We have to go through the assessment process. There are times when they no longer qualify for any special education services. There are times when
Coming from San Andreas?
Uh-huh.
Really?
Yep. And then there are times when students qualify for many, many services. And so it is difficult, and so what we looked at and what they looked at through this process, I was very lucky to sit down with the consultant through this process, because we have record of all 190 students who we assessed last year with our preschool assessment team, and we can kind of try to project. If this year is like last year, then we will have this many students who need preschool services.
So does San Andreas, if a child has an IFSP, are they required, does that show up in Cyrus?
Not until
Cyrus is the.
not until they
It's the student.
are referred to us. So there's two parts. So through the early childhood process, the parents can say, I don't want you to refer me to the district. They can say no. Then, or they can say, yes, refer me. Once we get that referral in our hands, we contact the parent fills out our registration paperwork, and we start assessing.
So I have an infant, and my child is receiving services through the County Office of Education. The services they receive are not posted on Cyrus?
They are, there's a list, so yes.
So-
The county office sends us a list,
Okay.
but it is first name only, because technically, they're not supposed to share that student's information with us until the parent says, yes, refer to the district.
Right, but would the geographical area, I mean, we would know these are students that are coming down the.
But
So-
sometimes they just need speech services. Sometimes they need speech and OT and adaptive PE and the whole gamut.
I don't know, I just feel like children who have been referred for those kinds of, children who are receiving it, get an IFSP, would be kids that you could almost, without a doubt, figure out they're coming down the road to our special education programs.
They're coming, but we don't know what services they're coming for.
Right, but
You
wouldn't they
can't
be
just
coming to your
assume.
preschool?
No.
Wouldn't you wouldn't say that they would qualify for preschool?
Nope.
Really?
Our preschools are for our more moderate to severe students.
Oh, I see. So you're saying these kids could end up in a county preschool program?
No, sometimes they just end up in our state preschool with speech services. Sometimes the parents don't want to send them to school, so for preschool, so they wait until they become kindergarten age. You can't assume. You just have to kind of wait until you assess, you figure out what the student needs, we make our offer to say, these are the services that your student qualifies for that we feel would be beneficial for their development and growth. And then through the IEP process, we offer programs. Yeah, you can't, San Andreas deals with a lot of students who sometimes, when they are infants, because of whatever happened in their birth or in the womb or whatever, sometimes it ends up being a speech and language thing that they, through that early intervention, really work out. And they show up at our door and we're kind of going, why? They don't need us, which is great. That's what early intervention's all about.
Well, I'm just thinking, if you're talking about how hard it is to find a preschool teacher because of all the specialized stuff they need, and you are, you have the potential for growth, it would seem like you would want to have more, you'd want to err on the side of more FTEs than less, and maybe.
$100,000 if you don't
I
have the
know,
kids who
I
walk
know,
through the
yeah.
door? I don't know.
Yeah. Is that the case? So this year, we are fine with having decreased by 1 FTE?
Hopefully. So far, it doesn't look like, we're not full
Oh,
yet.
okay.
But kids are turning 3 every day. So we are monitoring that very carefully.
So what's the ratio of special ed
For
teachers?
preschool, the special day preschool teachers can have a caseload of up to 15 12, 15. I believe 15, but that's not all at once. They have a morning session and an afternoon session. So that's 7 and 8, or 8 and 7.
And then they have assistants.
And they have assistants.
Most of those classes, when I walked in there, have been 4 to 5 kids.
Right.
They're not full.
They're very small right now.
But the needs are great.
Mhm.
The needs are great.
Just
I
for
just wanted to draw
my-
attention that,
Oh,
I see
wait.
that most of you are on this sheet, but if you're, Katie's looking at page 4 right now for preschool, and you notice that on this sheet, that's color coded, that there's comments here of what they're doing. So some of those questions that you're asking sometimes are in those little comment sections.
Oh, okay, I was looking at the wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, this one kind of gives you all, this is the entire report spread out into 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Okay, and Jim, because you're
I was-
taking notes.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, just for a quick synopsis, if you could describe what San Andreas is and how they fall into this, because I have a feeling maybe Mr. Galimba and I are kind of like, well, how does this play out?
Are you aware of San Andreas Regional Center and their services? Mr. Estrada, you're aware, are you aware of San Andreas? No. Could you explain to us about San Andreas?
I can explain to you what my knowledge is about regional centers. So when students are born, so from birth to 3 years, 11 months, and 29 days, basically from birth until their 3rd birthday, students who have needs that would be like special education needs receive services through either our county office, who provides services through the San Andreas Regional Center, I believe. And so the San Andreas Regional Center has in-home services. They offer parents training in how to help their child develop. They also work directly with the child. And every 6 months, they have check-in meetings with the whole team, with the service providers, the parents. It's like an IEP meeting to make sure that the student is making progress. They build goals. And they're right here next to Out Hill, San Andreas Regional Center. Some students who have very severe needs actually qualify to continue with their San Andreas Regional Center services after their 3rd birthday. But most of them, once they turn 3, receive their services through the county. Through the district. You may have information. You look like you had information. Tell me more.
Oh, no, I mean, it's, until they're 3, the state, through the regional centers, will provide services, occupational therapy, speech therapy. We have people come into the house and whatnot. But then, once they're 3, they figure it's the school district's job. So I think really the big mandatory thing is, isn't it mandatory that we do the assessments when they turn 3?
It's mandatory that our assessments are done by their 3rd birthday if the parent is okay with them sending the referral. Because the parent at that six months before they turn 3, they can say, no, I don't want the referral to go to the district, which then is difficult for us because legally we are bound by child fine to find students who have special education needs. But if they say no, then we don't know about them until they show up for their kindergarten year. But yes, we have to assess. If we get the referral, our job is to assess and have them either qualified or not qualified for services by their 3rd birthday.
And then continuing on into adulthood, San Andreas serves people with special needs from birth till death. It carries them on through their adulthood. They become advocates. They have, so that like a family is not taking advantage, or, that they have care. If they have no one, they provide care for them. And even though previous to, when you're an infant or previous to your, 3rd birthday, usually you're referred by your pediatrician or, someone that's working with the family. And then you go and they take you in based on what pediatrician has said. Sometimes if it's a school-age child, it might be based on their IEPs or whatever, and then they do their own testing to make sure that child qualifies for their services. up until your 18th birthday, you can enter San Andreas and then be cared for through life. After your 18th birthday, it doesn't happen. So if you're 16 and you're involved in a car accident, you've suffered traumatic brain injury, then you could become a client of San Andreas. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're born with it, although the majority of their clients have some kind of issues that start at birth. But it starts with birth and ends with death. So they take care for you your entire life, or they advocate for
Be
you.
conscientious of time and.
Yeah, I know.
Still have another report to
But
go
thank you
through.
for doing
Yes.
that.
So again, just a reminder, this is the whole report that you guys received, and broken down through the various years that we're envisioning it working out. This one, which started with the color coding, is what we're attempting to tackle this year. And Katie has gone through and broken in who's gonna work on it, and then some comments as to the work being done. So this is kind of gonna be our guidebook for the rest of the year. And this is what we'll be updating you throughout the school year on the various areas of what we're doing. And then once we rolled out the MTSS for Gen Ed, which will impact special ed, we'll roll it out. I'll present it, or Katie and I, and probably Rafael, and there's a team of us working on the MTSS process. We'll roll it out and show you exactly what that includes. But I think we're on number 7, right?
Yes. So again, with the consultants, we looked at our classified staff ratios. And so all of our classes are currently staffed with the, either the ratios in Ed Code. So for example, students with autism, the ratio of staff to student is 3:1. So our classrooms for students with autism are staffed at a 3:1 ratio. And so all of our classes have then been updated in terms of staffing. And we are maintaining one spreadsheet with all of our staff on it. It was a challenge in May to figure out which staff was where and with which students. So we now have one sheet where everything lives. It is making all our lives much simpler. It's funny, a simple change, like having one spreadsheet really has made all of our lives much easier. Related services. Some of this is kind of moot. We don't have any psychologist interns this year, so the first item is done simply because we have no intern psychologists.
So what does blue mean?
Blue, every one of these.
We just gave it a different color.
Oh, so it does, so
Yeah.
you said green means,
Oh,
On here, on this.
Green means
on
done,
this.
yellow means,
well, I see related services, and I don't see any colors, and I see
No,
color up
yeah,
there, so
it-
I'm confused.
I thought we were-
That's-
Related services has two of them that are green.
Yeah,
on
but then you
page.
have blue, so I just was.
Yeah, no.
That's why I
You know, I know we're on related services, but maintain behavior intervention specialist, professional development up above under aid staffing. Do we have a lot of, do we have a lot of behavior interventionals?
yes.
Behavior intervention specialists, do we have a nice group of them? Is it growing? Is it?
It actually shrunk. It is now smaller than it was last year. Just to attrition, many of our staff members are doing what we want them to do. They've gone off to go to college. They can't work the hours any longer. So over the summer, we actually lost about 10 of them.
So
We have 4 positions open,
Oh, okay.
so it's not that we're, it'll probably balance out. But with our new BCBA that we're contracting, she is providing the training that they're talking about here, because that is a core group of staff who really are, they need to know their stuff in order to adjust with a student's behavior. And so she is meeting with them on their Thursdays.
So wasn't the original plan that these were gonna take over the Tucci people?
I think we're down to 6 or 7 2Gs. So we are slowly but surely decreasing those
Okay,
bad
we're not
2G staff.
adding Tucci's then?
Oh, no.
Okay. Do you know who the Tucci's are? Yeah, okay,
It's a
so,
whole different planet.
you wanna
So
explain to them what
2G is a
Tucci-
company that we contract with for behavior services.
Charge $1 million.
They have a pretty amazing program, but man, they're expensive.
They're very,
So
it's a
our
Cadillac.
goal
It's a
over the
Rolls-Royce
years
program.
has been to train our own behavior aides who can do as good of a job. And I think that through our previous BCBAs, we did a really good job of that initial training, and now it's a matter of maintaining and continuing to keep that quality at that same level.
So if we want to decrease the number of aides we're having to contract with two, because you probably get 3 for the price of one.
And beyond that, I really just want to decrease the amount of aides we have working with our students one-on-one, because students have to learn how to generalize those behaviors that we're teaching them beyond their one person.
Yeah.
If I only respond to this one person, and I never learn how to respond to this person and the other person, that's not reality and it's not real life. So looking at what other types of interventions we can provide for students to help them to develop those positive behaviors, but without being attached to that singular person, I think in the long run, and in terms of thinking of their éxito, their success in life, is going to be better if we don't only teach them how to respond to one person. It's something that SKIA process I talked about earlier is really working on. What can we provide for these students to help them be successful? Because when they go to the high school district, in 99.9% of the cases, they do not get a one-to-one, and they're expelled within 2 years.
Do we have any current one-to-ones who are working with general ed students?
Yes.
Because I know that's been a practice in the past.
Yes.
How does that happen?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, because legally, we don't.
It could be 504 students.
They would have a 504 for that service.
Oh, and these kids do have a 504.
I believe.
It could be a medical situation.
We do have some medical situations,
Oh,
yes.
yeah. But that would also require a 504 plan.
Do we contract with the new bill?
Not under special education this year. I can't speak for previous years. I don't think so.
Do we have data on the back of the statement that you made that within 2 years, kids get expelled in the high school district? Because I've seen, for the last 15 years, I've read every single expulsion. And it's very rare, because the board asks all the time, and it's on the sheets with the expulsion, if the child has an IEP. And as soon as board members see that, there's a whole discussion about what you did for that kid. And most of the time, if they didn't do enough, they overturn it.
So then maybe they're just a kid at
There's
continuation
a lot
school
of violence
recovery.
that might be happening, and there's a continuous pattern of violence that happens. Because I've seen cases where special ed teachers, students have actually, a student has actually like beat up 3 people in the classroom, adults, and not get expelled.
Yeah.
Because of their IEP.
Because of the law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah. So perhaps I misspoke, but they are not successful oftentimes. If you check in on them, they are not necessarily successful. So,
related services.
Oh, related services, okay.
This one was about the interns and
right, and I spoke to the preschool adjustment. A lot of this has already been. And thank you for adjusting our school nursing staff. That's been extremely helpful this year, especially with our taking back of transportation for our Monterey County, our students who are receiving their instruction with the Monterey County Office of Education. We are now transporting them. And so having the additional nursing staff to help train the bus riders with those staff has been, I don't know what we would have done without having the additional staff.
Did we ever get the nice buses?
Well,
We got a couple of decent ones, but for the most part, they were their older buses. Yeah.
I hope the 2 buses that broke down this week were
Were
not
not
their
theirs.
buses. We should look into that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's shame. That was
Especially when we allocate for buses should have
Do
followed.
we have, do we have any other people that would, are any other districts using our transportation
It's not an
service?
IEP, but it's sort of like a,
Not-
students with
well,
disabilities, it's
Let
making
me
sure
take
that
that
they
back. I
can
know that other
physically
districts do
show up in
contract with
class,
the
like, you know,
transportation department for field
handicap
trips.
ramps and whatnot. but
So it's
it's
not, but it's
accommodations
not
for-
for.
not for our special
schools,
ed.
not for our
They don't
special ed,
have
no.
the, all of the
One of the
other
things we've talked about is
criteria,
forming a
but they can
consortium
have
of
medical
neighborhood
reasons,
districts.
like feeding tube or
Yeah.
Because we have our
so
buses
they don't
chasing each
necessarily
other.
need all of the special ed, but
Well, you have a bus with 3 kids on it, another bus with 3
and it's as
kids.
legally
We've
as.
got 3 conversations going on, you guys.
It's like this.
Okay.
Wait a minute, I just
Let's
want
pull us
to
back
clarify.
together.
You're saying that when we took back our students, that MCOE kept our buses, kept the buses that they had that were for services for the kids?
That's right.
So,
They gave us.
they gave us the oldest
They gave
buses?
us the ones they were going to, like,
Oh,
Yeah.
put out.
decommission?
They declared,
Did they do that
All of
with
our-
all the other districts too?
Yes.
for the most
Yeah.
part, there was one exception, but it was several years
We
ago.
paid for them?
Through our charge.
We paid for the buses?
Well, yes, part of the.
Indirectly.
No, very directly, because whenever they purchased a bus, that was part of the bill back, that came back to the district.
Well, that's what people need to be up in arms about.
Well, so
Is that
Sarah-
the school
so-
district should be, the Salinas City Elementary School District should be getting the buses that we paid for.
So Sarah and I met
IMCOE.
with the county several times. We went over this information. We rallied to get the newer
Did
buses.
this happen before I got on the board, the bus thing?
This happened last year.
Last year.
When we knew we were taking them back. We met with the county superintendent and we met with another person, and Gary, I guess, was in, Gary, the CB, and Sarah and I. It was a big, large discussion. And they did show us historical data of what they had been done in the past with other districts when they took back their kids. I think we got maybe better buses than we might have gotten there, but we still were not happy with the outcome.
They washed them.
We were not happy with the outcome, but we did go and rally for our district, I can say
Thank
that.
So this is sort of future planning, but it needs to be done this year. This is talking about working with HR to start early to fully staff our programs for next school year. And then also thinking about creating our own OT position. I think we would still end up contracting out for some of the direct services, but really having your in-house OT be the person who's assessing students for services, so that you don't end up in that loop where basically by them assessing, they're creating their own work and therefore assessing for additional work. Like, it kind of creates a weird loop. So having your own occupational therapist doing the assessments and then the outside vendor providing the services is a recommendation, which I think is worth looking into.
Do you know why we can't get an occupational, why?
I don't think we've opened that position for a long time. I think it could be open and we see who applies.
We opened it a couple of years ago. I remember seeing it. I would say, again, there's a dire shortage of special ed services, including all of the things that fall underneath there, the psychologists, the teachers, speech and language therapists, and OTs, occupational therapy. And my about this recruiting plans is what I know is happening in many other districts, specifically in the Bay Area and Santa Clara County, is they have gone out and they, just like we have the Philippine teachers here that are mostly filling our special ed spots, who, by the way, I want to say, staffed many of our Saturday programs. When I went and visited on Saturday, there were Philippine teachers were teaching special ed, teaching gen ed classes on our Saturday programs. But this, I'm wondering if we should be looking beyond the Philippines. I know that, I know at least 3 districts in Santa Clara County who are contracting with agencies bringing folks from India. And I've met some of those folks just through other relationships, and both for speech and therapy and occupational therapists coming, and I don't think we're going to find them unless we're going out and we're looking further from beyond what our universities and are producing.
Well, and there's a little hitch in our process in that many of the companies that we contract with have statements, which, you know, can be worked around in some cases, about not hiring those people who you have contracted with. So they're out there on EdJoin and all of these LinkedIn.
I'm talking about
Places.
the agencies, just like our Filipino teachers, they're costing us just the salary of a teacher, whatever that category is that they fall underneath. I'm not talking about outside agencies, I'm talking about these agencies that we have that are bringing specific cohorts of teachers from other countries to meet our need. And we don't end up paying more than what we would pay if we hired a regular teacher.
It sometimes isn't a long term because some of our teachers from the Philippines have families in the Philippines. They're here for a short term and they're doing an amazing job, but they don't want to stay here forever. So you end up in this cycle where you just have to keep filling positions.
I think they have 5 years, and they have all up to. So.
Well, then I think this,
People who pay a penalty, right?
So, yes.
Yeah.
And it depends on which agency, and some of them may or may not hold you to it. So, you know, there's a way around it. But they're out there finding them before your job is even, like, it popped up an hour ago and they already found them to apply for your job. They're savvy.
yeah, smart, they are.
I know, that's why they're making big bucks. So, in terms of litigation, of course, as the board, this is kind of your area that you hear from us the most. And you probably are wondering, how come there's only one thing you're focusing on this year? In a lot of ways, the items in the previous slides are going to help us to decrease our litigations. If we can solidify our staffing, if we can get the right people in the right seats and give them the right training, our litigations should decrease. They're not going to go away. I mean, this is, 2019 in the state of California. They're not going away. But if we can make sure that we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's, they can try to come to a complaint, but we can then back it up because we've done all of the right things. So for this year, Dr. Morales has helped me to create just a system for tracking our complaints and our litigations. That'll help us to kind of see the patterns so that we're not just, grasping at hairs to figure out what areas we need to train in. And then that should help us know what to train our staff in the future.
How costly was this for us in the previous academic year?
The next one.
Would that be- Oh,
I'm not sure if it's on this slide, but actually in the report, they said that we are actually spending less on litigation than many other districts who are similarly sized. That doesn't mean that we don't want to spend even less.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we don't want to just make sure that we're doing the right thing for kids. But it seems like a waste of money, right? No matter how much we're spending, that money that we're spending on litigation could be spent on kids in the classroom.
When they say we're spending less, I would argue. Remember, we're K-6. So they may be comparing us to unified school districts that are K-12 and the litigation across that. Are they comparing us only to K-6s? Because there's very few K-6s.
It's probably compared to K6 and K8s, because those are the common ones.
Right now, the reason I'm saying that is because some of the litigation that we're finding that we're dealing with are middle school kids. And so I think that would determine also, then high school ends up with a portion of that, yeah.
Right.
How many interns would you say you have in special education right now?
Hold on a second.
I mean, just a round, would you say
I don't
over
think we have
10?
very many interns.
I would say 15 or less.
I'm not even sure we have that many.
Or less. Interns, you mean in terms of teaching positions?
No, in special education, interns in the classrooms of special education.
Just special education?
Yeah.
But you're talking about teachers?
Well, yeah, because I'm just thinking in terms of litigation and you were talking about, you know, if everybody dots their i's and crosses their t's, but has anybody ever considered just a case manager position where the interns, you know, because a lot of mistakes are going to be made. I mean, they could be made by veterans, but they're certainly going to be more than likely made by interns or beginning, you know, like first, second, third years.
Fresh out of school, they seem to have a certain set content knowledge,
Yeah.
but you're right, interns
It's
may
just
not have that content
that
knowledge.
case, yeah, so if
There's
you had
not a
it-
lot.
If you just had, if all, you know, if you had a case manager who
Uh-huh.
did nothing but, you know, made sure the meetings were on time, made sure everything was in Cyrus okay, made sure all the services were provided, so so the teacher is not having to do all of that for all, you know, 10 to 12 students plus, that would the cost of that case manager maybe offset the potential litigation down the road? And I'm not talking about just a case manager for that general, but someone who would review them, everybody's Cyrus, everybody, you know,
Right.
I feel like everything we're hearing when it comes to us with litigation, will we drop the ball on this, will we drop, and it all has to do with the way it was managed. It doesn't, they're not talking about the
content.
quality, or it's always about, well,
What was
you know,
missed, what was.
what was, you know, what was missed in that IEP, what was not signed correctly, and I thought, if you had a case manager who just did nothing but manage
Compliance
cases,
checks.
yeah, I mean, that would be,
I think the great majority of it is that, yeah.
yeah.
And a lot
So,
of,
I don't
there's
know
also
that-
just parents who disagree.
Absolutely, but you know, once it's on that paper and it's, you know, then they have a process they can go through, but I don't know, it was just food for thought, because I give this a lot of thought, because I think this is.
That could potentially save us a whole lot.
I know, you know, I don't know. Because I'm thinking in terms of, you know, well, people, you know, I know at the county office, they have people who do nothing but, you know, make sure all those files are in order. I mean, that's their job. They make sure all those files are in order. They make sure everybody knows when those meeting dates are. I mean, it's just very specific. That's all that person does. And because, you know, that's their business. But I thought, wouldn't that be a novel idea if we went through something like that?
It's something to think about, especially because one of the recommendations is that we are understaffed in our program specialists by a 0.5, by a half of a person. I don't think a half of a position is going to do that, but in terms of planning for what we would do with a half a person, we have a system for checking compliance, but it's a check sheet. It's not digging into the actual, the nitty-gritty of what those look like. So it's a good idea. And fiscal. A lot of this is about the three of us working together and making sure that we know which people are in which positions are open, you know, position control, and really maintaining that on a very tight schedule. I've been meeting with the classified staff. I've met with Kathy and Sandra 2 times and have another meeting coming up. I've met with Sarah a couple of times about the budget, and so really getting those meetings scheduled so that we're not having things fall through the cracks. And then looking at our data to make sure that our data, not only in staffing, but in which kids are being served. You know, we had projections for the year. Did those kids really show up?
Yeah.
Are our classes full?
Yeah.
So is your thoughts about this spreadsheet, of sharing this on a quarterly basis? What would the board like to have a report back on with a special ed report? Would you just like this an information item, meaning information in your board packets as things are completed? I see you have a lot of this happening in mid-year. Do you want another check-in at a board meeting for information along
Yeah,
this?
possibly a check-in. What do you guys think, like maybe in the spring? Just, you know, I mean, I think quarterly is too much.
Okay.
I would just did maybe.
Like March?
Yeah, March. Whatever your calendar kind of has, you don't have a lot of them, you know. everybody has a lot, but I think sometime before the end of the year, so that if we need to do, if there needs to be any action taken on anything, that it makes you guys aware that this is a date where you may want to submit that, and then we can, and it'll be sort of like looking ahead to the fall. And then again, maybe next October, where school has started, and we can.
Yeah, that's great.
So we're going to transition into.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Into our next item.
Do you feel smarter about
I
special
feel-
education?
I'm ready on those.
I'm going to go get some
Yeah.
decaf.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't everybody feel just a little smarter?
So was this format easy to understand? You guys
Very,
are able to process
thank
it?
you,
Okay.
thank you. This is really
I'm not going
that was
anywhere.
it was
21
very
years,
helpful. Thank you for all your
You
work.
couldn't kick me out.
It's amazing.
Yeah, thank you for answering all of our questions and
Yes.
clarifying and, you know.
Try as you might, I'm not going anywhere. 21
That is
years. You don't leave your
Bless
home
you.
21 years.
Salute.
Does anybody else want a decaf?
All right, yeah.
Everybody else is now too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. All right, so, thank you again. I think we're all, I mean, this really helped. It was an expensive report, endeavor, and it was well worth it because I feel like the board is much more savvy about what's going on in the area of special education. So now we're going to move to the next one that we wanted to look at, and that's our demographic study. And in a nutshell, that is looking at our declining enrollment and making us aware of what we may be looking at in terms of where we're going.
So Sarah's going to go ahead and start this,
Sarah, thank you.
this presentation, and then I'll jump in somewhere along the line.
So it's my understanding that the board wanted to delve a little bit more into what's going on with our demographics, with our enrollment projections and whatnot. So I just wanted to say that we're using, the reason why you see school works up there on the screen is because I want to give school works the credit that they deserve in terms of, we are using some of their slides, and some of them have just made some minor modifications to kind of yield a little bit more information that we may want to take a look at. But for the most part, we did base the slides that you're going to see off of the demographic study that we had presented to the board back in March, I believe it was. So with that, I just wanted to, again, go over what this means, because we are going to be looking at enrollment projections. And enrollment projections, in my mind, are very similar to the fiscal projections that we use, in the sense that you're crystal balling what's going to happen in the future based on what is happening right now, looking at birth rates and whatnot. And in some ways, actually, I think enrollment projection is a little bit more solid in the sense that when you look at what's happening with the birth rate in the county, within the district, it's really a more solid indicator than when we're looking at financial projections. So here, I just wanted to repeat that again. A lot of it is science and what we're looking at, and what some of what are some of the utilizations for enrollment projections. And it's not only to project your facility needs, to take a look at short-term and both-term plans, but it's also, in this case, something that we need to use to make recommendations regarding the potential of school consolidation, looking at options and whatnot the district may need to do, because it does seem that the enrollment decline is going to be with us for the next few years. In fact, this is our 5th year that we are declining. It looks like the decline is going to continue at least for another 5 years more, which may complete the cycle, because in looking historically, in terms of what's happened in the district before, it seems like the district kind of goes on a 10-year cycle, where for 10 years it decreases, and then the next 10 years it starts to grow. And I don't know whether that cycle is going to be repeating itself again this time around, or whether we will continue to decline. But here in this slide, I think this is an important slide because it does show that at least until 24, 25, we will continue to decline. You can see there that year 14, 15 was really the peak year before we started to decline in enrollment. So at its peak, we were at 9,125 students. And from that year on, we have been on a steady decline. We've been losing close to 100 students or more per year.
So as of this year, it looks like we're down almost 600 students.
Well, yes, pretty
Oh,
close,
okay.
pretty close, but yes. So again, just wanted to show this so that you can see that at least for the next 5 years, the projection is that we will continue to decline, yes.
When was the last time that we had a demographic study done?
Last year.
And then the last time before that?
Before that, the year before.
So you're having one every year?
For 2 years in a row, we've had one.
Okay.
I just got another proposal asking the district we wish to update it. And so that's a really
Okay, but
great point.
my question is, from 9-10 until 9-16-17, how many demographic reports do you know that we might have had? I mean, was there one at least?
Not that I'm aware of. Maybe
So
there
the-
were
so-
some, but I was not
So the
not
board,
aware.
you're saying, so that the board that was here between 9-10 and around that time didn't ask for a demographic study report?
You know, I'm not gonna go as far as
Well, I would
saying
like
that.
to know.
I'm thinking, okay,
Well,
I can.
because of the impact that we have today is because of decisions that board members have made in the past, right? And we know this because nothing happens in education right away. And so I would like to know that. I would like to.
You know, I'm gonna venture to say that probably when the facilities master plan was put together, I can't imagine that the district did not have a demographic study done, because typically that's a basis for the facilities master plan.
But you
And
plan.
so, but I don't know that for a fact.
But you also would know, maybe back in around 11, 12, that there's going to be declining enrollment. You can look, the high school district looked out.
Yeah.
And planned for it, the board planned for it, it was a part of that planned for it. That's why you don't have the problems that Salinas City Elementary School is facing, that the high school district is not actually facing, even though they are also facing declining enrollment. And so, you know, my concern is that we don't duplicate what past boards have done.
Yeah, what I can say is, back in 15, 16, we didn't have a demographic study, but I remember Sean Henry, a community member, came to the board with a presentation projecting kindergarten enrollment out, and he clearly showed, and he was basing it on, I don't know, birth rates or whatever, kindergarten enrollment. He showed there was a decline. The fact that there was no other evidence other than what he showed would lead me to believe there had not been an official demographic study done previously, or someone on staff would have said, well, no, according to our demographic study, and they would have countered it, or they would have said something. So.
And that is a great question and great comments, because I think when you're in declining enrollment, it is almost a necessity to keep updating that demographic study, just in case there's something out there that we may otherwise not be made aware of. So I know last year, I insisted on having it updated, because it is important to know whether, you know, the declining phenomena is here for a couple of years.
But you know,
Maybe
the
less.
reason I bring it up is because I think, you know, we need to be reminded all the time as a board that the decisions that we make today will have an impact in the future, just like you know, we're getting blamed right now for things that previous board members made decisions on. I wasn't even here, you know what I mean? But I know now that, you know, I mean, I know now that I am here, you know, when we project out, when we're looking at what the future holds, we need to make those decisions so that it has the most positive impact on our students and our community. And I think sometimes we don't remind ourselves of that. And when, you know, and in other places I've been, it's a constant reminder to the board that your decisions may not make a change today, but it will in the future.
I think the one question that was raised in 15-16 was the opening of deal. And I just want to state this because, Stephen, you were the only one here at that time. The decision to open up a dual immersion program was based that we had waiting list at the other dual immersion schools. And that, I don't know if the demographic study would have shown that the students wanting into the dual immersion programs were not necessarily students within our district. You know, the waiting list was varied between 50% of, I mean, I don't know, I'm making this up. I don't know the exact numbers at that particular time because I was brand new. The decision, Kathryn, you're right, in terms of these decisions being made even before I was here. But a demographic study in terms of that opening of that school, I think the decision was made, as far as I could see, was based on a huge waiting list and parents really wanting to get into dual immersion programs, and the other 3 sites had those waiting lists existing.
But my comments are not about that year. They go back further than
Right,
that.
and point well taken. I want to say that, I think, for all of us, because, and I don't know if Stephen, you have anything else to add to that discussion, but the question that had came up, it was around the opening of the dual immersion program.
Because your staff brought it up?
And well, when Amy was
No, it was-
referring
it's a
to
community
somebody
member that
bringing
brought it up.
up the situation of why were we opening a new school? It was an opening of a new school,
Yeah.
and so there was an investment of dollars.
Well,
being
that
poured
decision
into
was
that.
already made, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
But he was just getting up to show that, you know, why are you opening a new school when you're facing declining it? And he was showing it. And my point was, we didn't have any evidence to
The contrary.
to contradict what he was saying. And at the time, you know, it just was like, okay, it was a point of information.
I just
but-
want to say, though, I was against opening up that school. So, you know, I was very, and, you know, as a board member for the high school district, I wasn't in support of opening it. And I had my other reasons why, and I knew what was going on with me. Today, a very different opinion.
I wonder if we could get some numbers on, are we actually attracting kids from out of the district?
We are.
With our
And-
programs?
Yes, we are. And that was in the original presentation. I didn't include that slide in this particular one here, which, by the way, it reminds me, I shared a Google Drive document with all of you, and that has the entire demographic study. It has several other pieces of information that I think would be helpful to take a look at. And I think if you look through the demographic study, that very good question that you're asking is in there, because we are attracting a pretty good number of kids outside of the district boundary. And I would attribute that to dual immersion.
Yeah,
Because you
I
can
would-
see
I
that
would
of the
think that
dual
if we can
immersion.
get Orton Gillingham
Yes.
up and running strongly, then we could attract more kids. You know.
Can
That was one of your
So is
strategic.
that
I don't wanna-
one of the factors that can, let's say this were to change. What are the factors that can make this change, other than the dual immersion and bringing more kids? What are other factors that could put us on, let's say, a positive path?
It would be more housing projects within the district boundaries, which we know would be very challenging to occur because we're landlocked. Unfortunately for Salinas City, our district is pretty well landlocked. There's no places where potential housing developments may happen. So the way that I think this could turn around is, again, to me, it's more cyclical, because as older families move out where maybe they don't have school-aged children and new families are moving into the area, you know, that would be certainly something that would benefit the district enrollment-wise. But other than that, or if we're going to a more dense, but
I think Stephen has brought this up for what, the last 2 years, Stephen, that you brought up the idea of really looking at specialized schools specifically
Yes.
around meeting special ed needs. that we have kids that also are leaving our district to go to Chartwell's, let's just use that. And the cost that incurs for us, would it be, and I put this on the strategic plan, I think it was when I'm looking, I think the goal was stated, you're looking for state-of-the-art programs. So if we have families outside our district who are coming for dual immersion, you know, Alisal started their dual immersion program 2 years ago, so we used to get a lot of kids from Alisal, but now they've got their own program. So as we look at programs that can attract, we can also attract kids
That would probably
outside
be
the
the only
district.
other
Well,
That would be-
option.
But to offer a free public school program versus Chartwell would be an amazing attraction for,
And kids wouldn't have to track it.
right, absolutely.
You know, I mean, the
absolutely.
Salinas area students
Yeah.
could come, you know, so there's.
Well, and I was telling Stephen, I've mentioned it to just some random teachers in the district, and they are like, yes, this is exactly what we need. So I think it's something for us to really seriously think about.
Or even just getting back the kids that are on inter-district transfers to other districts.
Exactly.
It's another-
And so, again, in order for that to happen, it would have to be some program changing.
Right.
And making our district really compatible and desirable.
Well, I'm
for
thinking
those-
we could attract those kids, you know, the districts we're losing children to, we could attract those kids to our district if we offered that kind of program, because they certainly have children that would benefit, and they may be the ones that are going over to Chartwell and paying, and if they could get a free education as opposed to a private education, that might
Because
help.
when you look at the birth rate, again, the birth rate is consistently going down. So that tells us that we're gonna get smaller and smaller classes.
So
And that's
it-
part of the
I think we have to be more novel.
declining enrollment issue that we have. Okay, so this one here is showing exactly what we just talked about, that birth rates are down within our district boundaries, and so this chart here shows that. And again, it shows, this one shows up to year 2022. And so it shows you what the birth rates are projected to be, the yellow areas. So the blue area is what has actually transpired. The 4 yellow bars there show what the birth rate projections are for the next 4 years.
I know,
Yeah.
April.
And then the amount increase, Sarah,
Yes.
what is that? What does that translate
The
into?
decrease in money, so when you figure that we get about, right now for 1920, we're getting close to 11,000 per student. So I would say that we're probably pretty close to the $6 million mark in terms of how much we've lost because of the decline in our enrollment. This is an interesting chart, at least it was for me, because when you look at it, it really shows you the number of neighborhood children within each one of the schools, which is the blue bar, and it shows you what their actual enrollment is. So this one compares, you know, what they should be at if they were true neighborhood schools, but what their enrollment actually shows. So for DS, you know, even though there's no neighborhood children, you can tell that all of the children at, or students at Boranda Diaz come either from other schools, from outside of the district, so they're almost a 100% either intra or inter-district school. When you look at Boranda Meadows, they're actually attracting more kids on what their school boundary shows that they should have. And when you look at El Gap, that's even a little bit more of a contrast there, because you look at the fact that they should be around 541, they're actually at 687, I think, or 700 and, no, I'm sorry, 687, I can't even see the numbers here. But that shows that they actually have kids. Again, I don't know how many are intra or inter, but they actually have more kids than what they should have if they were just totally based on their neighborhood area of attendance. And so you can see that for each one of the schools. And so this gives you a pretty good idea of whether schools is maintaining their numbers, or they're over or under. You also have the opposite when you look at Roosevelt, for instance. When you look at Natividad, you can see that by all accounts, their enrollment should be higher if all the kids that live within their attendance area were attending those schools. And so this shows that they actually have numbers that are lower than what their neighborhood numbers show, which is kind of an interesting phenomenon. I don't know what causes that, to be honest with you. I don't know what.
Well, I'm, interestingly enough, I'm looking at a school, and I'm looking at Mission Park, where their enrollment is higher than the number of students they have in their enrollment area. Because I know a lot of families, probably I'm thinking from the Cammon School, Natividad area, who may work in South Salinas, like they work at the hospital or they work in produce or something, but they work in South Salinas. They bring their kids over to South Salinas because it's closer, and specifically at Mission Park, they have EBC, so they have extended daycare. They can bring their children over, and so I'm wondering how much of that is offset by intra-district transfers from some of those schools over to schools where you see that the enrollment is lower, is higher than where.
Right, and it'd be interesting to have some data that would show that.
Yeah.
The other thought that just occurred to me too is that I know just over the course of normal business every year, I know that in trying to equalize, for lack of a better word, trying to accommodate the enrollment, sometimes we do declare some of our schools to be overflow schools, and so we do need to move children because they're over either in their grade level or they're over in the class, and so there is some natural movement that occurs within the district every year because of that, in the sense that, again, kids don't come in a nicely wrapped little package with a bow on top. Sometimes we end up with more students in one area or in one school than what we can accommodate because of large classes and so on and so forth. And so we try to move those kids to the schools where there's capacity, so that we don't have to have another teacher when we may be low in another school. So would you say, Alejandra, that that's probably some of that?
Yeah, we did that this year at the beginning of the year. We received a detailed report on specific grade levels. We didn't call one school to be the overflow school, but it was where the grade level where it needed to be adjusted.
And I think that's an annual occurrence. So I think some of that could be attributed to that as well.
When is the last time that we redid our school boundaries?
Would you know that, Martha? I don't have an answer for you. I don't know.
Not since I've been here. I think the map that we have goes back, I want to say to 2010, 11, if that's the original one that I used to use. But I did want to draw your attention.
No, I'm not done, thank you. Because my concern is that we probably should have a discussion, we should have a discussion about looking at our boundaries. Because I'm looking at this data, and I know North Salinas pretty well, lived there my whole life. And you're seeing a lot of kids, and I'm looking at it in here, and I'm noticing it to be true, is that you have El Gabalin School, and right down the street you have Natividad School. Okay? And so you have people who might live, even though the boundary is different, you're going to have people who are going to move their kids to El Gabalin because it's maybe, a block away, but their school is Natividad School. One. And so if that's the case, maybe shifting of the boundaries could fix that so that people don't have to do the transfer. We're looking at Salinas is growing. And Salinas has been growing since 2010, homes or whatever. And you have more people living at home nowadays than we did in 2010. And I'm sure that our homeless reports will show that, right? And so the other one is Loma Vista School. right? And so, I don't understand why we're still busing kids from the east side of Salinas to the north side of Salinas. When I was at Loma Vista School in the 4th grade, this has to be 40 years ago, okay, is when it started. And I don't understand why we build schools for neighborhoods, but then our kids aren't able to walk to their school because it's not a neighborhood school for them, right? And so I think we need to look at that so that, and my concern is that kids should be able to walk to school. The whole reason that the high school district did not build a high school out over in Highway 68 is because no one would have been able to walk to it where the levee was. Remember that, Alejandro? Everyone would have had to been bussed in. And you don't build schools so that kids get bussed in, you build schools around neighborhoods so that it creates a more of a community. So, you know, I have that concern. Also because at Loma Vista School, if you have a kid who misses the bus or you have a kid who has to stay after school for some reason, you know, you have parents, and I'm talking Hebron Heights, so we're talking right across the street from Sherwood School. And if you know where Loma Vista is, it's past the Laurel Extension over by Everett Alvarez High School. So it's not like it's close. So you have parents who have to go pick up their kids and whatnot, and it's on the other side of town. And, you know, and so I just think that we could look at ways to make it easier for people to attend schools in their neighborhood.
Agreed, and I think that's probably going to be one of the options that is going to be looked at, I would imagine, as this process moves forward, because it's not, you know, one option or two, it's looking at every single option, and I agree that probably changing the boundaries to, again, maybe come closer to having true neighborhood schools, and hopefully staying within those neighborhood schools, may again decrease the need for all of the transportation that is going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, if we need the transportation, that's fine. I can see, you can see that Sherwood School is impacted, but how do we make it easier? There's ways, I'm sure you can shift things a little bit where I mean, because we haven't done it. And it's gonna shake people up a little bit. You know, it happens when you do that, but you've gotta do what's in the best interest of the families, right?
Right.
Well,
and I think with everything goes on the table, that may be less dramatic or less
Yeah.
dramatic than some of the other options.
Well, and I'm thinking, based on what Kathryn is saying, that we really need to do a boundary.
We did a boundary
revisit.
study like maybe the year before Martha was on board. I don't remember.
Well, I think, wasn't there a boundary study when there was controversy over Lincoln School? Because,
That would have been 2010, 11.
but did you
Yeah.
change the boundaries? You can do
No,
a study,
I
but
don't
did you
think so.
change
no,
the
I think they just did a
Had
boundary
already
study.
changed.
But I was going to point you down to the demographic report. You can look at the individual schools and you can see the data down here of the transfers out. The interdistrict transfers and then the transfers out. So
Which
if
page
you-
is that on?
starts on page 13 and it goes on
And that's
for
on the
each individual
It's a
school.
demographic study.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm looking at Lincoln up there, because it's a dual immersion school. It actually has no, you know, it has no enrollment from the residential area. Now, did Monterey Park then become the neighborhood school for those Lincoln School families that did not choose dual immersion?
No.
Because the Monterey Park seems high compared to their, you know, their residents look high compared to their enrollment, so.
And I would say that probably those are the kids that, I could be wrong, but I think a lot of those kids end up at this project.
Yes, there's.
Well, that's
If you
what I was
look
gonna
at-
say about
Yeah.
Lincoln School, the
Yeah.
neighborhood. The majority of the residents in the Lincoln School area, they did not opt to move their kids to Monterey Park. They opted to go out to ask for interdistrict transfers out to Spreckle, if they did not go to the dual immersion. So I think
if I'm reading this right, but they have, Monterey Park has 167 kids coming from the Lincoln area.
Okay.
So I'm just saying,
It's a combination.
we keep,
Okay, sure. So this one here, it's a chart that I modified a little bit, and it's an enrollment projection for 1 year, which was 1920. So remember, the demographic study happened last year, and so this is what they said we were going to have for this year. And actually, their projection was pretty close, because they were 8 students off in terms of what they projected we were going to be at for the 1920 fiscal year. So this was a projection around December, January of last year into the 1920 school year. And so you can see that it's actually broken down by school, and then within each school by grade level. And so what I did was, I actually looked at what our enrollment as of 9/16/2019 was for this year, and compared to what the demographic study showed that we were going to have for each one of the schools. And then you can see on the last column there, the differences or the variances between their projection and where we actually ended up according to the enrollment as of 9/16/2019. And you can see that there's a total of 8 students difference. When you look at what happened the year before, the demographic study was actually a little bit more off. And I don't know if it was because of the first demographic study that we had had in a little while, but they were actually up by about 50 students versus 8 students this year. So I would say that this really, for me, added confidence in the demographic study, and the fact that they were so close to where we actually ended up. It's really a good thing. So that's what this shows.
I think it's remarkable too, kind of a testament to our dual immersion program. When you look at the kindergarten enrollments, and you look at DIA, and you look at Lincoln, and you look at Los Padres, which are and I know Baranda Meadows has a strong program, but when I think of the ones that really have strong programs, I think of those 3 schools. Those are high kindergarten enrollments for those schools, which mean our dual immersion program is not only attracting, but it feels like it's growing. And I think we need to really, we really need to keep enhancing that. Despite the fact that Alisala started their own, those kids are coming from somewhere. And so, I think that's, and I think we really need to keep pushing our dual immersion. And it even makes me feel stronger that if we were to start an Orton Gillingham school, I think we'd start. We're not gonna recover everybody, but we're gonna really start growing as opposed to declining.
So
That would be a good, Loma Vista would be a good place for that. I'm looking at this map that you guys pointed out on page 13. I know you want to move this along, but I'm not done with my thoughts. And I'm counting that 6 of our schools, Baranda Meadows, El Gavilan, Laurelwood, Mission, Monterey, and Natividad are all neighborhood schools. Those are all neighborhood schools. And then we have, in this, I know there's a couple more, we have Camin, Loma Vista, Los Padres, Roosevelt, Sherwood, University Park, actually Sherwood is a neighborhood school. But we have, aside from Sherwood, are all not neighborhood schools. We're busing, if you can look at the colors, we're busing kids in, and I don't know if this was like legally gerrymandered or what, but I think that if we can't even come up with a time that we did a boundary change, that maybe it's time that we look, and we do it, actually not maybe, that we do it again and look and see, because if we're gonna open up Gillingham School, then maybe we should do it in a school that might have more of an impact, you can go and you can put it in a neighborhood school, but what does that do? That doesn't help, because they already have, you're not busing anyone in there from other neighborhoods. But you have Sherwood School here, and then you have a sliver of gray. I'm on page 13 of the demographic report for anyone who, and then you have a sliver of gray. Well, Loma Vista is gray, so you jump over Laurel Heights to go to Loma Vista, which is across, you know, the Creek Bridge area, and then you have Laurel Heights, which circles around to Los Padres. It just, I don't know what the thinking is.
It's a crazy
It's
looking map.
really
isn't it?
crazy.
When you look, it's more like a quilt than it is, yeah.
You have kids from the Sherwood neighborhood jumping over a Monterey Park neighborhood to go to Roosevelt. Why wouldn't the kids in that Monterey Park neighborhood just move, I don't know, you know, I don't know, maybe it's the demographics of the area, move into the Roosevelt neighborhood, right? And then, because it's connected to the neighborhood. And so, you know, and I know people will get upset by that because people get upset when Salinas High neighborhood turned into a North High neighborhood because of the demographic study. You know, but we need to make our schools so that kids can walk to them.
So we're going to be looking at some process pieces that you want to engage in, as direct us as a board. And once we get through this information, I'll outline some process for you.
You know, while we're looking at this map on page 13, if you can imagine all the housing that's going to be built north of Rhonda there.
Yeah. Oh, that's sure.
That's a 10-year cycle.
Yeah, but I mean,
That's not our district.
it's not our district.
Yeah.
But
It's not a reader.
maybe we should be offering dual immersion and that type of thing closer to that. You know what I mean? We don't have a dual immersion school that's
On the north.
on the north side, that's closer to attract those kids.
That's a good idea.
They're actually going to
Well,
be.
that would be something for Loma Vista.
They're going to be having trouble building those schools anyway.
We told them we were willing to take their kids. So the 10-year projection for Santa Rita is that they're going to need 2 elementaries and a middle school in 10 years, and for the developments that are going in that area. And so superintendents have been meeting with the city around the developer fees are not going to be able to pay for that. They're not even going to pay for one school. And so I offered to, well, why don't we change our whole boundaries and we'll take your kids, you know, to solve the problem. We got schools, you've got kids, maybe that's a great solution for an elementary school. But I honestly, that's being a little sarcastic there, but.
Well, very
But
generously.
in terms of looking at the north, that would be good. I think you guys are giving lots of ideas, and that's going to come out in a process piece. So if we can make it through this and get to the process, then.
So this here, this table here really shows you the enrollment projection summary by school. And it starts again with our CBETS enrollment during the peak year, which we're at 9,125. Then it skips all the way to the current enrollment for 18-19. And then the 19-20 projection, the 20-21. So it's actually starting to look into the future. And so you can see that by, 3 years from now, actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we're going to be down about 1,100 students.
Wow.
So, you know, it is something that it's certainly timely to start the discussion, again, planning with plenty of time and looking at all the options, looking at all the considerations. This kind of gives us a glimpse into where we may be in 5 years from now. So I believe that the district has plenty of time to really go through a thorough process in planning and looking at all of the options to see what would best serve the district. So that's what this one, that's what this table shows here. This one here is a projection by grade level, just in totality. When you look at the district-wide by grade level, this shows you again, you know, the peak year, but it gives you a historical view up until 1920, and then again where we would be in 24-25 by grade level. So it just kind of takes the information and shows it a little bit in a different format.
Yeah.
So the previous one was by school, this one here is by grade level. And again, you see the total loss there of 1,135 students by year 24-25. And so that really concludes the presentation in terms of the numbers, or part of the presentation as far as the numbers are concerned, and hopefully kind of has given you an idea of what we're going to be looking at, and I think great ideas have come up through the discussions, and so there's definitely some things that we need to pursue and we need to start doing. So are there any questions in
Thank
terms of
you,
that?
Sarah. Does the board have any questions? No questions at this time? Okay, then we'll move forward.
Thank you for taking over too with Amy out of the room. So the next part is really looking at what do you want to do with the information that you just heard. And so, you know, we knew we were in declining enrollment. The last 2 years, we did the demographic study both years, presentation to the board in January. And since then, we have been monitoring our attendance, not just attendance too, but certainly our numbers, if not week to week, certainly month by month. And I say day to day, we did that in August until September 1st, and we're looking at which there included the numbers from September 16th as our final impact right now. So we've also monitored attendance because we want to lessen the fiscal impact as we have declining enrollment. So I'm just labeling these. I'm talking about steps. I call them phase 1, phase 2. So phase 2, these are all possibilities, is that the board can form a declining enrollment task force. You would appoint, the 7-11 committee is 7 to 11 members. District Advisory Committee, it becomes advisory to the Board of Education. And I listed there the cross-section of community members that would be involved in this 7-11 committee. And again, this is going to be a board direction. Of course, we would want individuals who are objective or independent of the school board and do not carry any political agendas per se. And we're using documents from CDE that have been provided to us of looking at a 7-11 committee that highly recommend that superintendents and school boards do not be included in that. And we're going to call it a DEC, okay, District Advisory Committee. So for that to happen, these are kind of the essential roles that the committee plays. They gather the facts. Everything that you're doing today, they would do, but in much deeper depth. They would be analyzing the current reports. They would be looking at each individual school that you can see. If you take in this demographic report, each school has a little graph of transfer students. It has classroom needs. There's some great information in here, and so they would be doing the analysis of this school by school. They would be looking at the facility master plan and what other efforts might be out there. One very good option could be redistricting. You know, that could be a possible option. So the board would charge this committee with the recommendation of looking at those options that our declining enrollment is imposing on us, and that could include school closures, but it could include a lot of other options.
Who's going to choose these people?
And
how many people would there be? How many business, community, and service organizations?
So the way I have
and so on.
We don't want, usually looking for no more than 11 members on this. So you're looking for, let's just say, a parent who owns a business who is a landowner or something. You know, you're looking for people that have multiple roles within the community. So you're narrowing that down, and the board appoints them. So we were going to ask the board at the end of this presentation if you had any recommendations of community members from your constituent areas that you serve. Parents, if you go back to that slide, we have parents, teachers, administrators. So we have many parents who are teachers or in our district. We have some administrators who are parents within our district. So they're going to be, hopefully they'd be objective. In here, we need to have our bargaining unit be part of this. if at all possible, we'd like to have, somebody from the civic or environmental or business area. So I do think that, as Stephen was talking about in terms of the growth of the city, and then where do you ultimately place, if there was a school closure, what would that look like? If you're looking at expanding a service of sorts, what school would be the best option for that? If we're redistricting, what would that look like? So you want to make sure that all of that, my understanding is, I could be totally wrong on this, maybe Kathryn, you probably have more history than I do in this, but my understanding is that we gave up that Rwanda border, that natural border that Rwanda Road formulates, where Santa Rita is, right behind Natividad, and on the to the west of Loma Vista. Was that one part our district?
Yeah, it was Soberanez School, right? Was there Soberanez School there? I think that's the name of the school.
So my understanding is that we somehow gave up that land, and it's just
a choice from past government.
Yeah. So anyways,
that
I
would,
do
that
think
would
we
be
have,
like
you do have
30
people,
years ago.
Yeah,
that
that
was
was
way
It was when I was a little girl.
I was
so
gonna
remember
say,
this.
it was.
There's houses there, but you know what, my question to you is, would you be on this committee?
no,
No,
the
no
superintendent and school boards would not be included in the
So
TAP.
who would be the administrators? Like, who
They would
you
choose, the
envision?
group would choose their lead. We might have somebody facilitating in the group. I think right now we have Alejandro, who said he would facilitate.
The
Right?
superintendent asked me if I would facilitate, and I would be happy to facilitate. What a 7-Eleven group does is it's basically provides options to the board, and then the board decides what to do. And that's the reason why they encourage not to have board members on this.
Which is fine, but I think though that the board should have a say, because it can be
You appoint
really
them.
heavy in one area of Salinas,
Right.
and there could be one ethnic group that dominates, and that's why I'd like to see this dispersed through a trustee
Yeah.
area. I'm positive that you could find a business owner that's a parent in the north side of Salinas, just as easy as you can find one who lives on the other side of town, It's like, because we need to be, it's really easy to find somebody close to the district office, and we really need to look at the impacts that stuff is, where the decisions that we're making are having in other areas of town. I don't know, I would even think maybe have somebody from that we feed into, the district we feed into, come in, because there's going to be some insight into the decisions we make and how it could impact. So maybe like a Blanca or someone else. Maybe as an ex officio.
That's a great idea. And I went ahead and included this. I thought it was kind of interesting, but the individuals have to be objective. They have to be looking at, outside of their own internal schools that they're serving, to make those decisions. I think the data speaks for itself. As you were looking at that, you're bringing up so many
I
great
think people from
ideas.
the north side can be as objective as people from the south and the east and the west.
So
I
too.
think that's a good point to cover the four quadrants of the district.
Oh, yeah, that should be a part of that.
So the
But
role,
now, going back to who selects who, you're not saying that the board selects who the administrators and the teachers
we're
are
saying you
gonna be.
appoint them. So we'll bring you a slate, but we're hoping that
Oh,
you all have recommendations
Oh,
to this board.
And these are all going to be people who volunteer to serve,
Absolutely,
not
yes.
who we ask to serve.
So the role of the DAC, the District Advisory Committee, is really to examine those two documents primarily, the demographic and the facilities master plan, and then to look at our efforts and look at the options. And you charge them to bring this recommendation on how to deal with this declining enrollment. And then this just kind of outlines what happens. Based on their analysis, on their conclusion, that will be brought to the superintendent and cabinet, and we'll make that recommendation to the board. There would be public hearings that would be conducted in the event of a school closure, and then board action on the recommendation, whatever that is. I will say that in the document, there's lots of different options that you may choose to look at, and the committee can do that. Reorganizing the attendance boundaries, looking at surplus rooms, really thinking about just expanding class size reduction, there's just different options that they can look at. So whatever the option is, and the conclusions that they come to, that would come back to the board would take action. And depending on, obviously if there's a school closure, there's got to be public hearings. And that happens in the course of time. So then, you'd implement whatever that action is, and there'd be, if we're talking redistricting, that's huge communication pieces that would need to happen with that, along with the public hearings, and then what would transition look like. So,
Any other timelines?
I think that's on the last.
Now,
this is your option. You direct us on where you would like to go with this. We put together, what we thought this would look like, and we're talking about, we've been really following the demographics. We spend, especially in August and September, a lot of time in our cabinet reviewing those enrollment numbers. Alejandro, when he came on board, one of his first charges was to do the staffing, and he jumped right in, and he has, did a lot with the staffing to balance off consolidations of classrooms, that meant combos, reducing, staff around our districts. A lot of things that aren't even listed up there, we didn't even talk about, have happened since January, February, March. The end of school into the beginning of school. We're thinking that we would like to solicit, again, names that would be on the slate for the 7-11 committee, that would go to the November board meeting, and we would appoint those members, and then, as we said, we have a volunteer facilitator that would run those meetings somewhere, and I think this, again, December to March is probably more realistic for number 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that you need more.
And then, and then probably more like April, May with the recommendation, because what needs to happen in between 3 and 4 really are public hearings too. Just, so you have to plan for those kinds of things to happen. And
So maybe you want public hearings in April, and then recommendation and board action in May.
So that's what we have for you today to really think about. And yes, Alejandro, you wanted to say
I just want to clarify that the facilitator does not run the meetings.
Right.
Once the members of the 7-11 are identified, they among themselves will choose a chair to run the meetings. And I would just facilitate by making sure that they have clear agendas.
The room feels
The room is available and all of that. But that would be, I would just be the facilitator, and I'll be present in every meeting. But the board members themselves, they run the meeting, they create the agenda for the next meeting, and so on.
Okay. So,
How is this different from the committee that was formed?
the budget committee?
Yeah, that's.
Very much the same. I think they take the facts and they gather the facts, they look at the facts, they analyze the facts, and they make recommendations. I think in that sense, they were looking at the budgets.
Yeah. I think this one has more of a feeling of a little bit more formal, because the members will be appointed by the board.
Yeah.
And so it really will function more under the guidelines of the State Department of Ed. Because like Martha mentioned, there's specific requirements and guidelines in terms of what this committee needs to follow, depending on the options that the committee will be looking at.
So we were looking at the guidelines for closing the school from CDE, but that's only one option. there are different options you can
But
take.
if you follow the options for the most severe option, then all the others should be better.
And Sarah and I have been in contact with 2 districts, and Alejandro also, he has experience with this in a prior district, putting our heads together around, meeting with superintendents and meeting with the superintendent and CBOs, and really looking at process that they did, their challenges, their successes through the process that they went through. But, every district is unique. I'm really glad, and I know as bad as it is, because it's a painful process, by the way. This is not going to be easy by any means. And I would just say that the redistricting piece is certainly one option that I think needs to be strongly considered, even just as much weighted as a school closure. And they would be looking at the financial benefit, the impact around the school closure. Is it gonna be greater than having redistricting, which is really painful and emotional for many folks.
I know with when Sarah ran the budget learning team, what really helped was there was already sort of a set set of recommendations.
Oh, yeah, we
So
don't
it
have
would-
one.
at least it would be something to, kind of focus on. Well, instead of recommendations, could there be like some brainstormed ideas? Because I think things like making Loma Vista a dual, looking at a school in North Salinas to grow as a dual language, or looking at the Fort Gillingham School, all those kinds of things might be something that the committee would say, well, yeah, before we actually close the school, let's see if we can change the direction of some of the schools.
And that's why your recommendation would be on options. We should have probably capitalized that word in there, options with dealing with our declining enrollment. So
Right. But a
what would
lot
that
of
look
people
like?
would not normally know that. They won't know that's something that we've discussed. So
Right.
if there was some kind of these are ideas brainstorming that have already been brainstormed, can you think of others, and then go from that list? Because I think what Francisco was, asking about was very important, because that helped, focus everybody, and instead of coming in there and just trying to feel around in the dark.
And that was really learned through the hard knocks of life, because it is a lot easier, and it's a critical point.
Yeah.
That you come to those committees or to those groups with at least some ideas of, what to look at. And it really saves a lot of time, and it really kind of helps guide the options that the committee may want to go to. I kind of know this because I've worked with several committees throughout my career too, and so that has always proven to be a very, very helpful starting point. And even if at the end they end up choosing not to go with any of those, at least you're presenting them with a starting point.
Well, they don't get to pick.
We do,
Ultimate.
because it's advisory.
But I do think that
So is this the direction you think you want us to take in terms of appointing a DAP for November? So that's going to take us some work between now and then.
Now, does this have to be agendized for a meeting in order to establish a committee? I mean, because
It'll be part of your November agenda.
and it needs to be an
I
action
think one
item.
of the requirements, and Lou's here, I think one of the requirements is that a legal counsel has to advise you of what the 7-Eleven scope should be. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, it was Richard.
You didn't know
He's putting you on the spot.
They're asking if it's for November, but I believe that one of the requirements for a 7-Eleven is to have legal advisor explain what the 7-Eleven is, the scope of it before it starts, right?
I think that would be very helpful. Help the classes out with the response.
Yeah.
So if this is the direction you'd like us to go, we can start at least, please, we're asking for you to help us with the slate. We'll come up with, internal people that we think might be in there. We'll give you the slate to look at, and anybody that you have that you know would be great to serve on this type of committee will help us address declining enrollment. I think there's lots of great ideas out there that we can certainly explore. So,
Does
does everybody feel really good about this, or does anybody have any problem?
Well, you can also add our, okay?
Okay, I think that we
take
would like
action.
you to,
Pursue this.
bring this to the next, our
October.
October meeting,
Okay.
and we'll get going on it.
So I had a question, do we have criteria when we go to that person to say, hey, this is what you're gonna be doing as far as a checklist of things when you choose something, we're not gonna, just go blind.
We'll develop something.
Okay.
We'll develop a short criteria. I mean, like for the parent, you have to be a parent, or this, you have to be this. But I'm thinking the criteria is going to be about remaining objective, looking at it from the big picture idea, because this is concerning, all our 14 schools. But also,
I have a good amount of people in mind. I'm actually fill up the social media.
we might have an election.
But some of them are not in the district boundaries, but they are very, very intimately connected with the district.
You
Is
can.
that
Well, you look at that list of folks who, we have business, community, service organizations, government, teachers, administrators, parents, collective bargaining, environmental planners, people that would be really, service organizations, many of the service organizations in Salinas, they know our schools. They know the population we serve, they know our families, so, having somebody that you recommend from those places would be great. But remember that the goal is to keep it small, to have a smaller committee that is advisory, again, to the board and to the cabinet. There is a place within the documents that says we could modify the recommendation that the committee brings. They are in an advisory role, and I think that's where Alejandro was leading to in terms of really outlining the scope of responsibilities for the committee, that they actually understand that this is an advisory and that the recommendation.
I think in response to what Francisco was asking, I think to be safe, we should stick with people who live within our district area, because I would not want someone coming back afterwards and saying to us, well, so-and-so lives, in Monterey. What do they have to do? Even though they work in Salinas, they've always dealt with things in Salinas. I would not want someone from the community to discount all hard work that went into it by saying they're not of our community. So I think that if we
First choice would be
I think our priority should be people who live within our district. If you're trying to narrow down who you would choose, I would look for people within our district, just to keep it credible. I just worry.
So let us work on developing that criterion list, and I'll include that in there, and you guys look at it, I'll take a look at it, and then we just need to start really approaching people if it's going to be on your November.
I agree with that. However, let's say, for example, if you have an individual who's taught in the district for 30 years, now retired, so he knows the district, or he or she knows the district, but they don't live in the area. They have the best interest of the district in mind.
You might live in the Alisat district, right?
No.
But I just, my fear would be someone would come back and say, if they were unhappy with the decision, would come out and point out, this person, even if you'd set that poor person up for having to defend their stance, even if they went along with status quo. I just feel like if there are lots of people, if we don't have anybody, then yeah. But if you've got multiple people, I would look for someone within the district.
And they have to be committed to the schedule.
Yeah.
And the schedule, and the kind of people that you're asking for probably aren't 8 o'clock meeting people. Because this is more after work, in the evenings, and we probably should be serving them dinner. We did when we did the naming committee and the demographics with go away and stuff. is that you need to make it very easy for them to come to your meeting and sit there.
So we'll
Are you listening, Mr.
develop some
Facilitator?
criteria and then get that to you. So
Order pizza.
we have a closed session waiting for us.
Yes, we do. Okay, then,
May I just
Yes,
ask one last question, and that is that I was just mentioning to Alejandro that it seems to me that the committee would want to work with really recent and accurate information. So does the board wish to have us do an updated demographic study?
yes, I think
Okay,
that's important.
so I will bring a proposal, or I will have a proposal at the next board
Okay,
agenda.
thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we are about ready to adjourn to closed session, but is there anyone from the public here who wishes to speak on any items that we may be discussing in closed session? All right, hearing none, we are going to adjourn to closed session. Thank you, everybody, this was great.